Spanish is spoken in over 20 countries around the world, and each country often has its own unique accent, pronunciation, and ways of using the language. So as a Spanish learner, is it important to choose a specific style of Spanish? What's up everyone? If you're new to my channel, my name is Shane and I am, amongst other things, a language learner, specifically focused on Spanish right now. And in today's video, I want to talk to you guys about choosing a specific style of Spanish as a Spanish learner. So before we get into it, I want to be clear on a couple of things right from the get-go. I don't think it's important which style of Spanish you choose, and I certainly don't think that one style of Spanish is better than another. And also, when I talk about choosing to focus on a specific style of Spanish, I'm obviously not trying to say that you should completely ignore all of the other variations. Furthermore, you can absolutely learn a good level of Spanish without ever really deciding on one particular style of Spanish. Many people do that, but it's not what I chose to do. And so in today's video, I want to talk about a few of what are, in my opinion, the benefits of choosing to focus on a specific style, especially when you're beginning as a Spanish learner. So the first thing is, as I mentioned earlier, oftentimes between different countries there are different uses of the language. Sometimes this might be that there are different names to call different things. Sometimes it's about the different pronouns. Sometimes it might be about how the different past tenses are used in different circumstances. And I think that when you're learning Spanish, especially when you're starting out, there's no need to really overcomplicate things and give yourself too many things to learn. So there's no need to try and learn 3 variations of the same word or try and learn 3 different sets of rules for how the past tense works. I think when you're starting out, you get a lot more out of focusing on one variation, learning how these things work, learning what this vocabulary is, and then from that you'll actually be able to understand the vast majority of the rest of it anyway, because it's only going to be slight variations in most of the cases. So the second point has to do with how we express ourselves when we're speaking Spanish as non-native speakers. A lot of us have the goal of communicating in a natural way, right? We don't want to sound too awkward or clunky. We want to speak naturally and as normally as possible. And I think that this is a lot easier to do when you focus on one specific style of Spanish. Sometimes if you're not trying to learn a specific style of Spanish and you're learning what we could call general Spanish, you can end up communicating in a bit of a mixture of different phrases and different sayings, different structures from all kinds of different places. And whilst you might be understood, it's probably going to be fine, it's not necessarily going to sound so natural. So I think that is another advantage of focusing on one specific style of Spanish. So the third benefit has to do with our comprehension, right? Our understanding of the language. A lot of people, when they're learning Spanish, they struggle with the comprehension side of things, especially with native speakers when people are speaking naturally and normally. And I think that a benefit of focusing on one style of Spanish is that you're able to focus on a smaller range of similar sounds. It's easier to kind of learn this smaller group of sounds rather than exposing yourself to the whole spectrum. Now, of course, even with focusing on one country, for example, you're still going to be exposed to quite a wide variation of accents and pronunciation and a few different variations in how the language is used. But if you take that idea and extrapolate it out over across like 20 countries, I think again you're exposing yourself to way more than you need to, especially in the beginning, and you're kind of giving yourself more work than you need to because you're trying to figure out all these different sounds from all these different places and they change in different ways. And so I think that when you start focusing on a specific style of Spanish, you're able to key into that style, to that accent, to that pronunciation earlier, and then from there you can start to understand these different accents. I've recently just passed 1,000 hours of active immersion of Spanish, and that has been almost exclusively with European Spanish. But I don't have any problems with watching a TED Talk in Mexican Spanish or watching a series in Argentinian Spanish, for example, until I come to the slang, which leads me on to the fourth point. So slang is hard enough to learn without having to try and memorize 50,000 different variations from all these different countries. Now, of course, learning the slang and the colloquialisms isn't necessarily the most important thing, but I think it's something that as language learners we all enjoy quite a lot, and it's something that's quite important in terms of understanding native speakers and understanding people as they speak in kind of day-to-day situations. And again, I think if you're trying to learn all this different slang from all these different places, it's going to be a lot, it's going to be confusing, and you're going to reproduce a weird kind of mixture of different slang, and again, that might not help you to speak so naturally. And so, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I don't think it's important which style of Spanish you choose, but I did want to just talk quickly about how you can go about choosing, how you can decide which one might be more useful for you or more important. So the first thing is just your location, right, and where you're most likely to travel to. So this was the biggest factor for me with Spanish, is that because I live in the UK and I'm more likely to travel to Spain rather than Mexico or Argentina, for example, Latin or Central America, I decided that it was going to be a lot more beneficial for me to learn European Spanish because that was going to be the Spanish that I was most likely to be exposed to. The second thing to think about is what type of content do you like to consume? You might live really close to Mexico, but if you're really interested in Argentinian content and Argentinian music, for example, then it's probably going to be more relevant to you to learn Argentinian Spanish than it would to be learning Mexican Spanish. And so the final thing to consider is the people that you're already surrounded by. If you already have friends that speak Spanish and they come from a specific part of the world, they come from a specific country, then obviously that's a good reason to focus on that style of Spanish rather than another. And this might be more important than things like the content that you enjoy or your location, right? For example, with Spanish I chose European Spanish mostly because of location, but with Portuguese I chose Brazilian Portuguese, not because it's going to be easier for me to go to Brazil or that I'm more likely to travel to Brazil more often than I would to Portugal, but actually because the Portuguese speakers that I'm already surrounded by are Brazilian and not European. So it doesn't really make much sense for me to learn European Portuguese so that I can speak to my Brazilian friends, right? So if you're already surrounded by certain types of people, then maybe think about that as well. So again, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, you can absolutely learn a good level of Spanish without ever really deciding to focus on one particular style, but these are the reasons that I think you could benefit from choosing to focus on one style. I know that not everyone thinks the same way about this topic, so if I've said anything in this video that you have any thoughts about or that you disagree with, please feel free to leave me a comment in the comments box below. And yeah, I just want to thank you guys for watching, thank you guys for the constant support, and I look forward to speaking to you again in the next video. Hasta luego!